Good morning. Today is the Finance Committee meeting, March 13th. Our focus will be on Operations Department, and I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Copeland to give us an overview of the plan.
Thank you. Yes, let me join Stefano Ventura in welcoming everyone this morning. And this is being recorded, so if folks couldn't make it, they'll be able to see this on our website, and that's just a reminder for anyone in the audience who wishes to speak that this will be recorded. This is the first of 5 presentations that we're going to be doing representing today is operations and transportation. There'll also be upcoming ones on student services, curriculum, technology, and staffing. And that represents the vast majority of our budgeted items. The first, operations, student services, curriculum, and technology represent about, not the staffing part of it, but the other part, about 7 or 8% of our total budget. So much of our budget is out of our control, and so I think that's important to remember. The budgeting process really begins almost as soon as we pass a budget in June. We begin planning in July for the upcoming school year. In August, buildings get their budget books, and they're preparing. The central office takes the first look at the budget in the months of November, where we do our first staffing reconciliation, and we continue to work and refine the budget throughout the year right up until the final proposed budget, which is in, well, that's the final, but the final proposed is in April. And that doesn't mean we can't change it, but we so far haven't decided to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Lill, who's the Director of Operations, and he's got a lot of his staff here, and I know your first slide is an overview of your staffing, so either then or now, if you could just have whoever is here identify themselves so that we can recognize them for their hard work.
Certainly. Good morning and welcome, and I'll just jump right in. This is the budget presentation for the Operations Department, which encompasses facilities, maintenance, and transportation. So as Mr. Copeland said, members of the Operations Department team are here. I don't think they can be picked up on camera, but I'll identify them as they fit in with the various boxes on the org chart. So Assistant Director of Operations, Ken Pitts, has joined us. He has supervision over grounds, custodial, and utilities, buildings, and maintenance, which is the acronym UBM. Another box there would be our administrative assistants, one of which, Kate Fielding, is here. All of our spreadsheets, databases, pivot tables, PowerPoint files, and the department as a whole, Kate manages to keep all that together and running smoothly. The other individuals within the department, I'll actually go from right to left. Project manager is Gary Musial, who is currently vacationing in Orlando. The supervisor of transportation, Mr. Oldis Vilsons, will actually be doing the second half of this presentation, so you will eventually see his face on the screen. Our supervisor of utilities, buildings, and maintenance, Chris Schaefer. We actually stole Chris from the Upper Marion Area School District. He joined Lower Marion on November 5th, 2018. He did not get a Bryce Harper contract in terms of salary. However, he did say he wanted no opt-out clauses, and I think there's a no trade worked in there somewhere as well. Our supervisor of safety, security, and custodians, Dennis Witt, is here today. John Cush is the custodial foreman who during the school year works more of a night shift. And last but not least would be Bob Schultz, the grounds foreman, and you can see the 9 ground staff that report to him, our custodial staff, and the remainder of the staff that we're going to get into a little bit more detail as we go through the presentation. So this slide shows the overall scope of the district. We're aware, and everyone recognizes, the 2 high schools, the 2 middle schools, and our 6 elementaries. That's 15 different buildings that are separated out across 13 locations, which comes up to a total of 1.8 million square feet of building space, and hold that thought because we're going to demonstrate that. That's 220 acres of land that Mr. Schultz and his group needs to plow, mow, maintain, keep the grounds looking good, along with the 29 natural turf playing fields, with which hopefully Mother Nature will eventually allow us to get our spring sports teams onto. And we always have our 2 artificial surfaces, 1 on each high school, which I believe we're currently using. So to give perspective as to what 1.8 million square feet represents, that is an aerial of the Harrington campus, and if you took all of our building area and just spread it out across that box, that's 1.8 million square feet. Now, that's a little bit deceptive because we're maintaining and cleaning that square footage across 15 different buildings, 13 different locations throughout the entire township. So, getting into some of the day-to-day activity for the buildings and grounds crew, I'll point out in the upper right-hand corner, one of our ground staff is assisting a class project, which is a tree planting. And in the lower left-hand corner is a picture of everyone's favorite activity, which hopefully has come to an end for this year, which would be snow and ice removal in the winter months. So this shows the scope of our maintenance efforts, the various things that we need to care and feed for throughout the district. Combination of both Lower Merion staff and skilled trades that handle HVAC systems, our playing fields with the grounds crew, and the various elements. Now, some of these are also handled by contracted services, elevators, fire protection, things of that nature are outsourced because of the specialized nature of those systems. However, our overall maintenance philosophy is to be proactive. Preventive maintenance is essential to our mission, and that we must be proactive to anticipate problems and plan ahead. So our mission, obviously, is to support the educational requirements. We support various district initiatives, such as inclusivity policies and various practices, extensive support to the co-curricular activities, and then also support with the capital program. Specifically, we're in the process of developing the new middle school. The operations department has been very much involved in the due diligence for the various properties and the start of the approval processes for the middle school itself, which has currently begun. So from a staffing standpoint, focusing on the maintenance staff, we have myself as the director, Ken, assistant director, Gary Musial as project manager, Mr. Schaefer with the supervisor utilities, and we have grounds foreman, 18 very skilled tradespersons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, very good at what they do, 9 very skilled grounds, and 3 clerical staff that help us keep it all together. We also have an engineering intern program where we have engineering students from local colleges. Currently, it's 2 Temple students. They'll work 40 hours a week for us during the summer. During the school year, we try to build in 10 hours a week based on their class schedule for various CAD support and project support, things of that nature. So getting into the day-to-day things that we see and we see the results of, we have our custodial services, some of the tools of the trade, specifically around our green cleaning program. They're instituting and using microfiber mops, cordless backpack vacuums, and other things that are depicted here. So the scope of the custodial duties is fairly broad. It's everything from the daily cleaning to the summer cleaning and everything in between. We believe in cleaning for health. We've successfully implemented a green cleaning program that is sustainable and significantly improves the quality of the indoor environment. And we're always looking for continuous improvement for everything that we do as part of the custodial tasks and duties. The staffing consists of, as I said, the 2 supervisors, Mr. Witt and Mr. Cush. No overall change in the staffing headcount, if you will. The head custodians, in my opinion, I believe they have a critical role in the daily operation of a school building. Those are individuals who really operate on the front lines of making sure that the buildings are ready, the buildings are operating smoothly, everything's clean and ready, and that we can have the day-to-day curricular programs take place, and then also the substantial amount of co-curricular and community use of the buildings even after hours. So that is where the 59 custodians fit in, along with the 8 part-timers. We have 4 custodians on the weekends, driven a lot by the use facilities on the weekends and our warehouse and receiving. And then Sue Rogers is the administrative assistant assigned to that group. Any outside groups, Lower Merion Little League, basketball leagues, they're very familiar with Sue because she's the one who handles all the scheduling and booking of outside groups using our facilities per board policy and administrative regs. So since this is a budget presentation, we had to get at least one slide in here with dollar signs. There will be more. The personnel costs for the 1920 budget are at $12.6 million. The utility costs we're going to focus on during the course of this presentation because there's a lot of things the district does to keep that number under control, and we've been very successful. That budget number's coming in at $1.8 million. And then purchases, services, and supplies is a wide variety of things, everything from paper towels, toilet paper, to replacement parts for equipment. That's at $5.2 million.
Jim, can I interrupt you for
Sure.
just a second? Do you have in here further along what the change is from last year
Yes.
to this year? Okay,
Yes.
great.
So, average building costs, what does it cost to operate a school? And again, these are expenditures that we can allocate to a specific school, whether it be one of the 6 elementaries or one of the 2 high schools. Over the past 5 fiscal years, you can see that we've kept track of how much money is allocated to each category. Contracted services would be the specialized things such as elevator service and repairs, fire alarm inspection and repairs, which is a life safety issue. It's also most of the time proprietary systems. And then also fire sprinklers and fire extinguishers are all under that contracted services line, and that's also a life safety issue. The high schools are typically more square footage. You have a larger enrollment and more use, so it's not surprising that that has a higher number than an elementary school averaged out based on the costs. From a personnel standpoint, we do have included in those personnel costs the $291,500 for overtime. We do have to allocate overtime for the reasons shown above, whether it's snow removal or getting the school ready for September. We take a lot of things apart in June and we have to put them back together by Labor Day, so that's always a push there in August to make sure these buildings are ready. Winters can change from season to season. This one was relatively mild, so that does have an impact on our overtime expenditures. The amount that you see on this slide for 2019-20 is the same overall overtime budget that was allocated for 18-19. There's no change from year to year. I'd like to spend a few moments here to focus on our utilities and how we monitor and manage our utility expenditures. This chart is scaled to show the picture of the 2 key components of the utilities. Upper half is a 5-year trend for electricity, both usage and cost. And the blue line shows that our utility consumption, our kW per hour, steadily continues to decrease. The dark green line is also trending downward, but it's not exactly parallel, but that's driven by the fact that we are doing a very good job on the procurement side. We work through a company called Provident Energy that does our utility purchasing on a consortium basis, so it's multiple districts, multiple entities going out to market with our utility demand. The other thing that you see there is the energy costs fluctuate with the market, but we also, as a large commercial account, utility companies will charge you if you consume more electricity on one of those 5 peak load days. So when it's August and it's 96 degrees out and everyone's air conditioners are running at full capacity, the grid, PJM, starts to struggle. So what they do is they want people to get off the grid as much as possible. The more you contribute to those peaks, the more you are charged for a demand charge, and that shows up in next year's bill. Since typically a lot of those peaks occur in July and August, we can usually keep our demand charges down because we can reduce our peak load contribution because we're not at full capacity. We're not fully occupied in the months of July and August. One of the things that we do need to take into consideration, our ability to reduce that peak load contribution. That was impacted by the fact that one of those peak load days, or actually two of them, occurred in September, which meant we had fully occupied buildings. In kind of a worst-case scenario, or Murphy's Law, not only were they fully occupied school days, they were also days where we had back-to-school nights at two of our schools. So we really didn't have the ability to cut down our consumption on those peak days because unfortunately we were fully occupied and fully functional. So the electric bills that have started to arrive in January of 2019 are showing a higher demand charge than we're accustomed to in the past just because of that scenario that was unfortunately unavoidable. So that kind of gives you a picture of the fact that we are reducing our electric consumption, the blue line. The green line is a lot to do with the procurement and our management of our demand charges or PLCs, things of that nature in the electric market. Natural gas has a tendency on consumption to fluctuate. That's really temperature driven, driven by how cold it gets. It has gone down, and there was as you can see, the consumption went up again in 2018. The cost runs somewhat parallel to that. Again, we do purchase our natural gas through a larger consortium, and we recently locked in on the natural gas commodity rate for the next 3 years. So we know we're stabilized there, so that will help us forecast the cost. But weather is always the variable that will determine how much we will eventually consume. So in terms of our energy management, in addition to good equipment, good practices are key to controlling utility costs. Our building automation systems, or BAS, are key to managing the 1.8 million square feet of buildings we have, allowing us to set, monitor, adjust, schedule, and control the tens of thousands of pieces of equipment that heat and cool these buildings, heat, cool, and ventilate. The BAS system allows us to systematically turn it off and turn it down when you're not there. Managing peak loads in conjunction with our demand response program will impact what we pay for electricity the following year. As I said, the demand charges are calculated based on the amount of electricity that we use at the specific times when the grid has the greatest demand. So by reducing our consumption on hot and humid days in July and August, we reduce our PLC. Again, we lost out on some of that opportunity by getting hit with peak days in September, which occurs occasionally. So a lot of these savings that you see from the various energy management practices we have are realized on every kW per hour that we consume, which is some of the savings we see on our utility bills. And continuous improvement is found in the little things, controlling electricity uses in corridors, restrooms, sensors, and timers, as well as moving towards LED lighting, which is becoming a lot more cost-effective in the market. So regular and routine maintenance is performed for all the obvious reasons and has the additional benefit to utility costs by maintaining efficiencies and reducing losses. Our preventive maintenance program, our personnel is primarily dedicated to changing filters and belts, cleaning HVAC units, lubricating pumps, monitoring equipment. This obviously has benefits for indoor air quality, but also the 3 filter changes per year reduce the wear and tear on the equipment itself, specifically motors and fans, and it also helps the equipment itself to operate more efficiently. Drives, we have a lot of systems that control the amount of heating and cooling water that are delivered. That it fluctuates based on the amount of load, the temperature outside, how many people are in a particular room or building. We make sure that we have that operating optimally. Just like our homes, maintaining the building envelope saves energy loss, and it also improves comfort so that less energy needs to be consumed. Ballast and transformers and various electric equipment lose efficiency when they begin to fail. So bad ballast and sensors are addressed quickly so we can eliminate the waste. And nothing good comes from a water leak, ever. Hot water leaks are especially wasteful because you're not only losing the water that you're paying for and making a mess, you also lost the energy it took to heat that water up before it eventually leaked out of the tank. So in order to benchmark how we perform with all of the discussion we just had about the utilities, the $1.8 million the $1.8 million that we spend annually, we took a look at what our costs are per square foot. So an industry benchmark, which came from PASBO, Pennsylvania Association of School Board of Officers, they did a benchmark, and for Southeast Pennsylvania, they found the median cost per square foot of a K through 12 system would be about $1.32 per square foot. So when we started tracking that, we were already below that at $1.19. Over the years, you can see we continue to drop down in terms of how much we pay per square foot. That's the $1.8 million that we've budgeted over the 1.8 million square feet that we operate. This year, we managed to drop under $1 per square foot at that 0.96. That is an awesome number. You can see our electric cost per square foot continued to decrease based on some of the practices that I just described. Natural gas has a tendency to fluctuate, but it's down significantly from the 0.27 numbers in previous years to basically the 18 and a half cents per square foot. And the water costs have gone up. We have more students, there's higher enrollment, but it looks as though we've been able to stabilize those costs. But getting under $1 per square foot was a very good accomplishment, and it's our goal to keep it below $1 per square foot, if not lower. So breaking it down into each flavor that went into that chart, our electricity budgeting, what I wanted to show here is our budget to actual comparison for years since 2014, 2015. We have started to implement tighter budgeting, so you can see that we've adjusted our electricity budget as we've experienced lower costs. So you can see those maroon red lines are dropping because we're able to recognize that our actual costs, the blue lines, have come down over past couple of years. The budget for 2019, 2020 is we're going to put $1.1 million into the budget for electric costs. That's actually $150,000 less than what we budgeted for 2018, 2019. That will be a case where Mr. Schaefer is going to have to keep on top of that because we've now tightened the window on him. And if he manages to keep it there, we'll all go down and buy a jersey with his name on it like Bryce Harper. I'm only going to use that joke twice. I used it twice too many. So we do receive a budget projection periodically from our energy provider, Provident. Again, they're somewhat of a broker for us, but they also analyze our bills and then look at where the market's headed. And again, they give us the ability to procure our energy on more of a consortium basis. Natural gas budgeting, similar comparison between the maroon budget numbers over the past years and the blue actuals. So you can see our budgets and estimates have been reduced and tightened over the years. Again, the natural gas is going to be affected by weather, so we do put more of a variance in there. We do have a projection from Provident that's saying our cost should be around $350,000. Because of the variability in weather, we actually budgeted $400,000 for that line item.
Let me just, I'm not going to do this for every account, but I think this is a good example of how we come up with the number. So you look at your experience, you go to your broker, and you say to your broker, give us some estimate as to what we should be budgeting in here. We take their advice seriously, and if we do this, the right thing in terms of efficiencies, you end up with not having spent as much as you budgeted, which goes into a surplus. That's a good thing. It shows that the systems are in place are appropriate, and you end up with money left over, which goes into capital, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the overall budgeting situation, but this shows strong accounting. Thank you.
Thank you. So this will basically wrap everything up so that we kind of get a sense of where that $1.8 million is going, which, again, wraps up to about that $1 a square foot. And I'm not going to drill any deeper on that. Our electricity and natural gas we discussed. Heating oil is not a large expense. We fire our boilers on natural gas as much as we can. The only real time we ever switch over to heating oil is some of our accounts have an interruptible service to them where PICO can call us up and say, look, it's really, really cold. We want you to get off our gas system. We get a special account for that. At that point, we switch them over and fire heating oil, but that's a couple days a year, and it's always weather-driven.
Jim, how many buildings? We started switching, just 4 of them?
We're down to 3.
Oh, down to 3?
It would be Lower Marion High School, Harrington High School, and Marion.
And the
They're
rest
still
of them are
doing fuel.
gas only now?
The rest of them are gas only. A lot of the reason is we've now switched over to those condensing boilers, which are more efficient, but they only fire on gas. So the interruptible service is just down to those 3 accounts. But we see the PICO email, and then we go out there and switch over and burn the oil through that period that PICO tells us to drop out. Water and sewer is consumption-driven, and as long as we don't have massive leaks somewhere that we're losing domestic water. A lot of that's driven by the occupancy and consumption. So the overall budget, everything basically totals up to our budget allocation for next year of $19.6 million. Our overall budget is not very significantly higher than last year's budget. Actually, it's lower than the actual expenditures for 2017-18. Salaries and personnel costs, there's some positive, or there's some beneficial impact here. I think Mr. Orlando could explain some of the things maybe with PSER's contributions, and our benefits have been stabilized cost-wise, and also how we structure our salaries within the district.
Sure. So I think Jim's talking about the personnel costs. So it is true. We've had some stabilization of some of our benefits. We haven't seen an increase. We have had some turnover in staff. We also did finally settle the labor contract, so we know exactly what the terms are going forward. So those are some of the big things that have come into play.
Jim, it looks like a big, we're over our budget, right, for this year, or no?
No.
17, 18, so we're under 17-18's actual?
Correct.
Do we don't anticipate getting to that?
I mean, the actual in 2017-18 was the $21 million that was actually spent. That was before my tenure, but I think there was some engineering
It looks like there's
projects
$2
we
million
picked up there.
in purchase.
There were some projects that we had to do,
Yes.
Maintenance-wise, that had to come out of the general operating, didn't qualify for capital, so they had to be done. So that's why you'll see that account's higher than what it is. And then we also had some professional services for different explorations and of enrollment expansion that were operating also. That's why you'll see that increase greater than what's in the budget for this current
Isn't
year.
that where we had to, we got more civil, we got more architectural fees?
Correct.
As we were exploring the new middle
That's
school?
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not anticipating those unexpected.
That's correct. They were kind of like one-time things that we've kind of got over with now and don't anticipate them for this year or next year.
Vic, when did they switch electric out of the 400 accounts and into the 600s?
I think it might be it might have been the year before, 16, 17, I think.
Okay, because at one point electricity was coming up in a 400 account, which would have been that purchase property, and then it's now currently a 600. That's thrown things off over the years. So I can't recall when they went back, but where your electricity lands could shift it from one way or the other. Probably is from prior years. Yeah. I know that's thrown things off in the past. One of the things that you will notice on the chart, which is why it has the black background to it, our purchase professional technical service is now up to $994,000. That I'll have another slide that explains where that money and some of the things that's being allocated in there. The purchase property services, that's the repair and maintenance of the buildings, security monitoring. That's where electricity used to be. The only thing left there now is water. The other purchased services is things like insurance, communications, travel, things of that nature. 600 is the supplies. That's where we have most of the utilities, so obviously that number, the 1.8 million is in that 2.56. Property, that 350,000 is allocated for things for like equipment replacements, specifically vehicles. You can see in 2017-18 there was only 23,000 spent on that, so a number of vehicles that were due for replacement, maintenance vehicles, not buses, a number of vehicles that were due for replacement were deferred. We were able to catch back up last year, and then we have more vehicles proposed for the 19-20 budget. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we're going to ask for approval for a replacement dump truck for the one that died about a month ago. We're actually not going to take delivery of that until next year because that's in that budget, but because it takes about 8 months lead time for one of these trucks to get delivered and outfitted, we'd like to place the order now and then have the delivery take part of that budget year.
Isn't that big enough to be like a school bus and come out of capital? Isn't that big enough a big enough expense that
Well,
it would come out
typically
of capital rather than operating?
Typically, all operation replacement vehicles always came out of the operating fund. We never used them out of the capital reserve. Capital reserve is only used for school bus vehicles only.
Okay, so a big
We've never
purchase like
done
a
that.
dump
Yeah,
truck.
we've never done that.
But it is budgeted and it is anticipated. It's unfortunate that the vehicle died a year before we were planning to replace it. So I just want to get that on order and in the system and have it before next winter. Again, as I said, I did put a black background behind that purchase professional technical services. And the reason why I did that, there's additional funds that have been added into that budget line item that are focused on school security. Back on February 19th, the board approved advanced protection company for the uniformed security agents that will be placed at schools. That's where that funding is coming from. In addition to the contract with advanced protection, the security officers are going to need workstations at the entrances to all these schools. We're starting with the 6 elementaries. The first one that we did, we picked one of the schools. It was a fairly straightforward install. We anticipate some of these offices, we're going to need to do some additional furniture partitions to give this person a workspace and have the main office function correctly. We're also looking at about $2,500 per computer workstation because we want this security agent to have a computer that will not only be able to run the software that they need, but also gives them visibility and access into our camera system. So that is also included in that budget number that was I identified or tagged. And also we're looking at additional security assessments and upgrades ongoing. So we've been very successful in energy procurement, taking advantage of market rates. The enrollment increases have resulted in building additions, which does mean additional custodial load or cleaning area. So over the years, we've closely examined the duties assigned to each custodian within a building to account for various changes. So we're only adding the staff that's necessary. We continue to implement a new floor finish that has reduced significantly the time and manpower. New technologies, we're trying them out as they come along and trying to stay cutting edge. Grounds department, grounds group always has a continuous examination of ways to reduce maintenance and work more efficiently. Property disposal, when we come to the board and list an item for disposal, like a truck that needs a $10,000 engine replacement, we've decided to just surplus and dispose of. We have a very successful online bidding system, not eBay. It's Municipid. We've been very successful in disposing of surplus equipment and actually collecting some money for the sale of equipment that's no longer useful to us. We have a very good relationship with township staff, and there's a very good cooperation between both organizations. The township picks up the trash at our schools, just the schools. They also help us with leaves and bulk trash disposal, and they're also our source of road salt so that we can keep our parking lots properly cleared and keep the ice off of it. Those first 3 items we do pay the township. We reimburse them for what we consume or what they give us. However, we have the benefit of we're basically paying below market rate, and there's some shared resources there. Playing fields, I know Mr. Copeland has pointed out that our secondary schools rely on public parks and fields in order for us to have enough playing surfaces for all of our athletic programs. So there's a lot of combined maintenance on things like South Ardmore, which is where Lower Merion's varsity and JV baseball is. Vernon Young is 9th grade baseball for Lower Merion. Valor Park, Gladwin Park, I know has Harriton's baseball, JV, maybe freshman. McMorrin Park that handles some of our middle school programs. And every now and then, if we break down, they help us out, and vice versa.
Jim, and maybe this is for Vic, just to back up one, when we do sell that excess equipment, say where's that, does that money go back into the operations budget? Does it go back into general account? Like, how do we manage those?
Well, it depends.
It's a small number, I'm sure.
It depends upon where the initial expenditure was made out of. So if it was made out of the general operating fund, it's going to be deposited back in the general operating. If it's been paid out of the capital reserve, it goes back in the capital reserve.
Right. But say Jim's department sells that dump truck that broke down. Does now, and let's say gets $2,000 for it. I don't know, I'm making stuff up. Does he now have?
It would go back into the account where the expenditure was made.
Okay, so he then has $2,000 to play with, and if he needs to put a new, yeah, or, okay.
So, Mr. Schultz, you said we got 16,000 for that truck?
Yeah, I think, life to date, we've recouped about $175,000 in.
Yep. I'm sorry. So for the microphone, Mr. Schultz has indicated that Municipal generated about $175,000 of revenue. If it makes its way back into the operations department, we put it in the social fund, but.
Don't make jokes like that.
Yeah, that's probably not a good idea. Okay, so just in summary, our maintenance philosophy is to be proactive. It's essential to our mission of providing high-quality facilities to support educational co-curricular programs every day. And again, we want to be proactive, anticipate problems, and plan ahead, which is a segue into the final topic we'll discuss from a facilities and maintenance standpoint before Mr. Vilsons takes over on the transportation side. We have a five-year capital improvement plan. School districts do this. I had a similar system when I was at Downingtown. This is where you have to stay ahead of your buildings and stay ahead of your systems. Things have mortality. Roofs have an end of life. Boilers have an end of life. Chillers will eventually die. You try to get the most out of those pieces of equipment, but eventually there's a time where they need to be replaced, and it'd be better to replace them proactively than having it dead in the water on September 4th. That would be a chiller problem. So in terms of things like life safety and building code issues that are major renovations that we might do under this heading, energy conservation, facility enhancement, major repairs of systems. And again, with enrollment growth, there's some opportunities there where we might be using some of these capital reserve funds to do these long-term projects. I'm not going to go through each project line item by line item. Actually, we did this last month at the Facilities and Purchasing. Just one point of clarification. Even though these projects are listed here on this slide and there's a dollar amount assigned to it, none of these projects are technically approved until we bring the bid, the quote, the final price to the school board. So, for example, the major roof replacement and restoration, we've budgeted $1,077,000 for that. Tomorrow at the Facilities Committee, we have a purchasing report item for $1,076,350 for the contract to do that at Marion. Penn Valley, well, let me back up here. The masonry facade at Marion, the masonry facade at Penn Valley, that's actually going out to bid, so you'll probably see that in April. So again, until you vote on that bid, not a contract, it's really not an approved project, it's just the budget allocation for the various projects. Penn Wind's roof came in at $977,000, $977,450. You'll see that tomorrow. And then actually on this slide, these are just 3 remaining projects. The chiller and both of those CNG capacity improvements have already been approved by the board. We've already started that work, or at least if on the CNG, on the paperwork side of it. So there's $4.4 million that's going to be spent in the 1920 budget year for large facility upgrades, restoration. So there's your chillers, your roofs, your facades, things that need to be repaired and restored before they just completely fail. Over the projection, this has a tendency to kind of fluctuate a little bit. It's based on what projects we've allocated for which year. Again, none of which are officially approved, but at least allocated anywhere from the 4.4 that we're going to spend this year down to 2.8 million in 21-22. And then you can see we have some larger projects coming through towards the end of that 5-year projection. So at this point, you see a picture of a lot of smiling transportation employees. They're smiling because they believe there will be no more snow for this winter. So I will now hand the microphone over to Mr. Vilsons.
Yeah, that's a good point. So before we move on to transportation, I just want to see if anybody else has any other
Certainly.
questions on maintenance.
Thank you for the presentation. I guess I'm going to very rough line it, but if we're spending approximately $20 million in maintenance, can I rough line that as $2 million a building? The reason I say that is if we're building a new middle school, that's kind of the rough number. I don't know, Vic, if we're looking to budget for operations. Once it's opened, electricity, gas, all that will go into that building.
Yeah, he had a slide, it's slide 13, page 6. He had broken it down to middle school, high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. So we probably have a pretty good, there it is, right there, a pretty good estimate on, is that right? I mean, we could probably assume that the new middle school is going to be somewhere close to one of our existing middle schools?
That does not include personnel costs. So what Mr. Orlando has, and we've done this, we've looked at like a forecast of what we think we're going to need for a head custodian, a custodial staff. We would have to add that number onto that 539. But to your point, this is going to be probably a 220,000 square foot middle school, thereabouts. Well, for utilities, $1 a square foot, we currently operate our middle schools at about 214. So the utility numbers, I think we're going to be pretty, we already have a good benchmark for supplies. We know we're going to have to do elevator maintenance, things of that nature. But the only thing I wanted to just clarify is that 539 you see there does not include the personnel costs, which would be primarily custodians, because they would have to be assigned to that building.
Okay.
No, I think, Bob, you're definitely looking at that. I know you've talked
Yeah,
about it.
we actually presented, I thought it was $4 million, including staff, for the new school per year. Is that?
Well, yeah,
ballpark?
to new staff, to
Well-
staff the building with costs, yep.
Yeah, I'm going to assume, or hope, more assume than hope, that some of the utility costs would actually be less because you're building a brand-new facility. You're able to put in more energy-saving situations than you would, in a retrofit. So I'm going to, you would generally always look to spend less per square foot with a new building. You're putting in better windows, you're putting in, it's a tighter seal and so forth and so on. But it's bigger, and the approach to it is going to be, obviously more to maintain because of the driveway. So you kind of have to ballpark those a little bit. Yeah, but utilities should come down.
But other than talking about the big construction number, I know the administration's been very focused on projecting out these daily,
Oh, yeah,
these
yeah.
yearly costs. You cannot ignore them.
No.
And you
no,
have not
at all.
ignored them.
Not at all.
Sue, do you have anything?
You mentioned that we have custodians that work on the weekends.
Correct.
Can you just describe which custodians get overtime? Do they all get overtime? Do they get overtime when it snows? Do they get overtime when they work the weekend?
Okay. I mean, the overtime would be triggered once they exceed 40 hours, because that puts them in the time and a half. The weekend custodians are primarily high school.
Yes, and we brought those custodians on to alleviate running overtime for the people that work Monday through Friday.
So,
They specifically just work weekends.
sure. So as Mr. Witt stated, the weekend custodians, that's their shift. So they're getting paid straight time for the time that they're working on Saturday and Sunday, which alleviates having a full-time custodian who's already put in his or her 40 hours, then coming in for use of facilities on a Saturday. And at high schools, it's pretty much 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. with the various community groups. But at that point, that's a straight time labor cost, not a time and a half, because we've built that staffing in. When there are snowstorms, there's an overtime contingent to that, because we get out there at 4:35 in the morning and get everything ready to make sure we can open, or open 2 hours late, whatever the case may be. Basketball games, if it's on a weekday, we usually have a custodial staff there anyway, because that's their shift. Holidays and weekends, the weekend custodial staff at the high schools has helped to reduce the overtime load on that. And then with the elementary schools, there's a rotation that if there's a play on a Saturday, we will bring a custodian in, and that will trigger overtime for elementary use of facilities such as that.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we were considering overtime,
Correct.
and we look like we're doing it efficiently. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Yeah, I looked at our public.
The public look back.
And asked, and nodded no. Okay, so, very good. Thank you, Jim.
All right.
And we can move on.
Thank you.
Good morning. Jim's presentation reminded me that every good American presentation should include sports analogy, but it's too late for me, so I'm going to be lacking in that regard. The gentleman you see on...
Thank you.
Gentlemen you see in a picture are, 4 of them are mechanics and 2 are the drivers that help out in the shop. They are very highly skilled tradesmen. I'm always impressed with their knowledge, and mechanics now are not just a wrench, Bluetooth connections, diagnostic software, laptops, everything is now computers. Initially, I would like to give you the scope of our transportation operations. We currently transport approximately 9,652 students. I'm saying approximately because that number changes daily. Approximately 125 schools. Again, that number changes daily. We have some non-public schools or special needs schools where we have 1 student. So if they move out of district, that school goes off. We don't transport there. We travel about 1.5 million annual miles. We do large number of field trips and sports trips, and when you transfer it to the bus trip numbers, because some of the field trips and sport trips require more than 1 bus, some may require 5 buses, then you see the numbers there, they are pretty high. We maintenance and repair 162 vehicles, 123 of them are buses, 39 is district support vehicles that are Ken and Bob's staff uses. We have 84 large buses, 72 passenger buses currently, 30 smaller buses, and 9 wheelchair buses. 65 of those buses are CNG, 37 are diesel, and 20 are gasoline. We cover 5-county metropolitan area. 40 of our schools are located within Lower Merion School District, and 85 are located outside. 10 public schools, 84 non-public schools, and 31 special needs schools. Special needs transportation has no legal limitations on the distance we have to travel unless there is IEP restricting time on a vehicle. So we wind up going to pretty far out locations. Some of them are just listed there just to kind of give you the idea what area we cover with special needs runs. A lot of these runs at this time are contracted because it's 1 or 2 students going to most locations, so we don't want to run 72 passenger or even 30 passenger bus there. Our contractor takes a smaller vehicle there. Part of scope of transportation also, we have 604 daily home to school runs. Again, that changes from day to day, but it's approximately around 604. 16 buses provide 32 midday kindergarten runs. That includes 5 buses that service MELC. 20 runs to 11 community work program sites. 8 runs to 2 technical high school programs. 9 after school buses for programs and clubs. 18 late buses provide 36 late runs. Mr. Copeland asked me to check in if his other districts, surrounding districts, and I know that Haverford, Radnor, and TE do not provide any late runs. So that is.
Yeah, I asked him to, the 2 things that I think really distinguish the service that we provide, not for those districts that have half-day kindergarten, not all of them do the midday run. They basically give you one run, and you have to either take the kid there or pick the kid up. And generally, I think they pick them up in the half-day. And we provide late buses, and for our secondary, we actually provide 2 sets of late buses, correct? There's a 4:30 and a 5:30.
Yes.
So.
Also sports trips, field trips, summer programs. During summer, last summer we operated 45 vehicles, transported 563 students. Transportation is in operation 300 plus days because we do trips on the weekends. When district is closed for the holidays, we transport non-public schools. Or also when district is closed for in-service, we transport non-public schools. Transportation, I mentioned that already, transportation to non-public schools. Transportation eligibility, district policy sets it at half the distance required by the state law. For elementary students, it's 3/4 miles, and for secondary students, 1 mile. If student lives in an area where they have to walk on hazardous routes, then we would provide transportation.
The question is, do we give the same eligibility for non-publics?
No. Like, when you called Hartford, Radnor, and T about the late buses, did you happen to ask what their limitations were in terms of?
No, I didn't. I think, I don't want to put it out there, but I think most districts would go with the state regulations.
Thanks.
But it
Making a
wouldn't,
change?
but to answer,
Yes. 'Cause I won't be
Mr.
sure.
Copeland's question, it's same rule is applied to the non-public school students that reside in the schools are in a district. If they have the student lives within a walking area, we will not provide transportation. Non-public school transportation, non-public school students enrolled in nonprofit schools within the district boundaries or outside the district boundaries at a distance not exceeding 10 miles by the nearest public highway. That requirement creates situations where we would have to pick students on the one side of the district and take it across the district to opposite side of the district, and then continue 10 miles out of the district to a non-public school. To make the system manageable and sustainable, we utilize shuttle transfer system. For example, our Harrington buses pick up non-public students together with public students. They would bring it to 7 or 7:30 shuttle to Harrington, where the non-public students would transfer to the buses to their individual schools. If we would have to run a bus for each non-public school and pick up 15 students all around the district, it would be logistically impossible to do. And there's just illustration of some schools that you can see where they are in relationship to our district. We go in Chester, Delaware, Philadelphia.
I think the part to emphasize here is the state regulation, as I understand it, all this is, you have to bus within, it's 10 miles, right?
Correct.
But it's not 10 miles from your house, it's 10 miles from the outer edge of the boundary of the district.
Correct.
So if there's a student who's going to, I'll pick Malvern Prep, the 10 miles is from would be the closest to that on the other side. So if the student lives in, say, Wynwood, it's not going to be 10 miles to Malvern Prep. It's probably going to be closer to, 20.
It's not as the crow flies, it's
No,
by
it's
highway.
by the publicly accessible road. So it's not going to be. That's why you see the light blue area is the 10 miles out of district. You see that we don't come completely to the edge just because their bus would go make it turns and everything. So it's that way, yeah. Just to highlight how we utilize some of our money in our budget. This year we introduced a board-approved new fleet management solution called Fleetio. This software is replacing our current outdated fleet management software called Dolphin Fleet. This new solution is easier to use, intuitive, web-based, and modern. It also comes with smartphone applications for vehicle information and for tracking parts and inventory. It will allow us to better track vehicle history, issues, and recommend vehicles for replacement. We also always look what's available in a safety-wise. So starting school year 17-18, we changed our bus specifications to require fire-resistant or Kevlar school bus seat covers. In 18-19, we began to install loose wheel nut indicator on our buses. This is approximately cost is around $22 per bus. It allows driver, when they are a part of a driver's pre-trip, is to check to make sure that there's no loose wheel nuts on the wheels. So visually, you often can't tell if it has turned. So this kind of, you can see that one that is out of order, that would be right away bus out of service, and it would be spare bus used for this bus, and mechanic would take care of it.
Aldous, that reminds me, could you give a real quick, what is a pre-check before, what does a driver have to do before they take off, and what does a driver have to do when they come back to the yard?
Yeah, the driver, before the trip, they have to check oil, all the fluid levels, walk around the bus to make sure there are no dings, everything. They have to check that every light, 8 ways, ambers, headlights, every light is working. They have to run through the door opening cycle. If bus has air brakes, they have to do air brake check, which most of our buses do air brakes. They have to make sure that there's enough pressure in air brakes. Post-trip is pretty close. They don't check fluids at that time, but they walk around the bus, make sure that there's no flat tires, no damage to the bus, that everything is working.
And most importantly, they have to walk to the back of the bus, correct?
Yeah.
Make sure there's no students.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's. I didn't consider even. That's more of a policy. Yeah. We have on our buses we have a child check. So if you don't walk back to the bus after a certain time, it will start. You will hear bus horn go off. So in order for a bus to shut down and leave a bus, driver has to walk in the back of a bus, press a red button, walk back. So
Is that true at the end of each trip too? So like if I'm doing an elementary school run, I drop off my elementary school kids, do I go back and hit that button just to make sure that the kids haven't fallen asleep?
Sometimes drivers do if they're gonna shut off a bus. Usually we check it after the run because sometimes, we pull up at the school, we don't have a time to check it. I mean, if kid is sleeping, he technically is safe on a bus. So, but at end of the run, that's mandatory. So, but some drivers check it after every run if they can stay at that school. But some of the schools we have to load the kids, go off, or unload the students and go off to the next school. So
As soon as the engine turns off, that system gets activated. So when you turn the engine off, you don't go back.
So what he's saying is, as soon as the engine is shut off, the system is activated, the alarm system is activated. And so if the driver doesn't physically go to the back, as I understand it, and hit that button, after a period of time, an alarm is going to go. And then people in the yard know that hasn't been checked and they go on the bus.
that is correct. Yes. And to this day, I haven't learned how to deactivate the system because they have a key in half ignition. So every time I shut down a bus, I get an alarm. So I don't drive students though. Current department staffing is 4 supervisors, 5 clerical, 6 mechanics, 1 full-time bus driver trainer, and 121 bus drivers hourly. We have 127 positions. We always find ourselves a little bit short because people leave, retire, and it takes a while to replace them. 26 bus and shuttle aides. Major elements of our transportation budget, like almost every budget, salary and benefits. The one item that's been growing lately is contracted carriers because we have kind of maxed out our ability to transport, especially special needs students. So we go to contractors if it's not a school that we transport it, or if it's a student that requires single transport. And of course, energy, fuel, CNG, that includes CNG, diesel, and gasoline, and a little bit propane.
Aldous, I'm just backing up 1 second at your current staffing. How do you manage when bus drivers are out sick? Is the 121 enough to cover when someone is out, or do you use your full-time?
We have spare drivers that are to cover, so we're managing. Some Fridays have been tricky, but we're managing overall. But we come pretty close because in addition to, we always have a few drivers on the long-term absence out for surgery or something. So with daily absence calls, we But we have spare drivers that
But
cover that.
we hire full-time spare
Spare
drivers.
We have 19 full-time spare drivers.
And if it ever happens that we're fully staffed for a particular day, they have work to do in the maintenance and so forth and so on of the vehicle. But there are times that if we have a significant number of drivers out, you actually have to, on the spot, reroute and combine routes, correct?
Yes, sometimes. We also utilize, I think it's for food service. One of the food service drivers have a CDL and S endorsement, so we call there. Annette, who is our mail truck driver, she comes from a school bus background, so we would use her before we would try to combine runs. Then we look at well, this non-public school is closed today, so maybe this bus can swing and do this bus as part of a run. So
But you've got to do this on the fly.
On the fly.
And the concern I have is, we're doing pretty well with drivers, from what I hear my colleagues, that this is really, I guess it's a national crisis, that we really just don't have enough drivers, and we're doing pretty well, but it is an ongoing concern. If you drive around by Matson Ford Road or so forth, you'll see we've got big banners out, and we're saying that, we're actively recruiting at a constant pace.
So are the 19 included in that 21?
Yes,
121?
And that is true that we are in fairly good shape compared to other districts, but we do find ourselves struggling with hiring now. For 4 years, we used to be able to just hire a driver fully credentialed with S endorsement. Now we're reaching out to drivers that have a CDL and training them for S endorsement. Also, we're training some of our bus aides to become a drivers who showed interest to become a driver. So that's their opportunity to move up. Our salaries and benefits also include fairly sizable overtime budget. It's $461,500 per year. The part of it is mechanics, because smaller part of it is mechanics, because we have to call them out on the Saturdays. So the last Saturday we had the bus stuck in Westchester in mud. I was happy that it's mud, not snow, but still we had to get a tow truck out to get the bus out. So mechanics are always on a call at nights and on the weekends. Sports activity trips, field trips, including night and weekends, they frequently put drivers in overtime. After-school programs and clubs also sometimes put a driver in overtime, because the 7-hour run may become a 8-hour, 15-minute run. Snow removal from terminals and buses. So we use our drivers for snow removal. Bob's crew helps us immensely with plowing, but all the physical work is done by drivers. According to federal law, we can't put a bus out on the road with the snow or ice on the roof of the bus. So before we go out, we have to make sure that every bus is scraped. So that's done by our drivers. We bring them in early. On a 2-hour delay, that's pretty big undertaking. We kind of get close to it's just enough time. So when it's closing, we have more time to do that. Early dismissals and 2-hour delays, because then drivers basically stay on a clock. Special transportation arrangements for testing days, where we run 2 runs. We run regular time, and then we run 10 o'clock, somewhere around there. And emergency situations. The transportation budget, it's compared to what was budgeted in 18-19, increases around $350,000. Biggest part of the increase probably is contracted transportation. I estimate that we may spend $200,000, possibly more, on contracted transportation. Other part is some of increase in salaries and benefits, and there's also $60,000 one-time expense for upgrading our fuel master systems, which are systems that track fuel consumptions at our tanks.
Aldous, do you have a specific, let me rephrase this. How do you budget for snow removal? So, I think in Jim's budget, there's a he has a sort of snow removal, a separate category, I think, or with you, there's going to be the overtime for the, if there's 2 hours.
Yeah, it's basically an
Or do
overtime.
you just put it into the overtime budget? and
Yes,
that's that?
pretty much so. It's been pretty steady throughout the years. It may fluctuate a few dollars, but it's been pretty steady. Because not every driver also goes in overtime when they come in snow removal. If they come in for 2 hours, snow removal, 2 hours, and then we close the district, they wouldn't get paid for it.
So do you have a sense of how much it costs the district on a snowy day? Over what would be
I
regular?
would have to, I can't give. Go.
You have a specific crew that comes in early to do that, correct?
Yes, it's voluntary though, so it's, the crews are whoever comes that day, so I can't really, it's not a part of their job, so it's, and a lot of people can say if they have a bad back or anything, they can't do that, so.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
yeah, there's a lot of factors going into that. The 2-hour delay means drivers are still there on regular time, so obviously that leads, so that's why it's kind of an overtime
Yeah,
budget.
we can calculate, if it looks like we may have an early dismissal, then we just keep the drivers there, and so you know that. Otherwise, they're on call, and we have to bring them back, but the problem is, contacting everybody and getting them back and so forth.
Right, but I'm just looking at, I think you had a number of 500,000.
461,000.
Yeah, so it's, in the overall scheme of things, it's a much smaller
Yeah.
number than.
Yeah, and that's not all snow removal. It's like I said, probably major part of it is sports and activity trips on the weekends. I mean, we go to trips to zoos and during day and everything. So that leads to the overtime.
District-wide, if you have a heavy enough snowstorm, we've had storms where we've had $50,000 of expenses across the district. Now, that's not just the transportation costs, because that's the labor to get the fleet ready, which is primarily getting the snow off the roofs. But that's having the grounds crew out there plowing, salting, custodians doing the sidewalks. So that would be a type of situation where I think a $50,000 snowstorm would consist of, we close school on Tuesday, spent all day Tuesday, and maybe even part of Tuesday night, take the building back open for Wednesday.
Thank you, Jim. Why, part of the reasons, I'm trying to highlight some reasons why our budget is increasing. As you know, the enrollment is increasing, and that has impact on the ridership on our buses. Also, some of the special needs requirements increasing, as you can see in the slide below. In 13-14, only 58 of our students required bus aid. Now we have 128 bus aid requirements, and that number gonna increase before the year is over. This is our ridership, and it's important to note that ridership is not always matching enrollment numbers, because it all depends if students moving to next year are in a walk zone of the school or hazardous roads and everything. So it's not always matching, but has the same trend, basically. We always we keep our fleet up to date, and we have a fleet replacement plan for 17-18. 14 buses were replaced. In 18-19, 14 buses will be replaced, and 3 new buses will be added. And in 19-20, our plan is to replace 14 buses. So that should keep our fleet a little bit under 10 years old. Cost and savings efficiencies, we have optimized routing. Our new routing supervisor has done a great job. We really haven't had added buses since 2013. We did rent 1 bus this year because we just needed 1 additional bus. But we haven't increased bus numbers, we just have maximized our runs. We operate multi-tier system, which is the most cost-effective system, and our buses average 6.05 trips per day, where industry average standard for 3-tier system is 5 trips per day. We utilize contractor transportation for longer runs and runs with fewer students. Routing contracted runs in-house, so we tell the contractor where to go, how to go, and if there's 2 schools they can serve, we tell them to get both 2 schools on the same vehicle. We utilize shuttle transfer system, and fuel is purchased through IU consortium, which usually gives us a good price and also stability.
Well, this,
Yeah.
I know it's not in this, and I don't know how easy it would be, but is it possible to get a list of the schools and how many students we transport to each of those schools?
That shouldn't be that difficult. I will ask our routing department. You mean public or all 127 non-public?
No, I'm more interested in the non-publics, but I'm curious too about our individual schools as well. So how many kids do we take over to Episcopal?
I will ask her routing to compile a report. I don't know if she can do it. It may take a few days, but then
Right.
I'll send it to Mr.
And if it takes a
Copeland.
lot of time, don't bother. It's more curiosity. than
It shouldn't be
anything.
too much time, but she's working on some belt time projects and things, so I just, sure.
So the optimizing routing, like, I presume that's something you do almost every year, if not even in the middle of the
Every
year?
day.
Every day.
Every day.
And I just think I think that's really important to note, that like people ask, saving money isn't like a big thing. And it's not a board action, it's done every day. And I think that's what that is, right?
And we try and, we try and not go past a 30-minute ride, correct?
We trying, yeah, on average, we trying not to get over past 30 minutes. Of course, there are students that are outliers that we would have to go longer, but that's, yeah. And many of the students ride a lot shorter time. So yeah, it's something we do every day, because one student comes in and you see, okay, I don't have where to put him. Maybe we can move this. Maybe and it takes a lot of work, because it's mostly with special needs students. We just can't make that decision ourselves. We have to work with special education department, and they have been very helpful. They say, I think this student can be 15 minutes longer in bus, but this can't. Okay. We also try to find opportunities, for get some money back in our budget. One of the major items is annual state subsidy. Pennsylvania's formula to determine state transportation reimbursement is extremely complex and consists of multiple separate calculations. Basically, the allowance for each vehicle is calculation of the age of the vehicle, the size of the vehicle, the number of students assigned to the vehicle, and the number of miles the vehicle travels with students. This calculation is then multiplied by annual cost index, which becomes the maximum approved cost, or what many refer as state formula. This number then is multiplied by the school district's market value aid ratio to determine the amount of subsidy. In addition, yeah.
For all you math majors out there.
So, but this budget, which gives us $2.4 million, or this revenue subsidy, is a formula that's devised by the state, correct?
Yes.
And when was it devised? When did they develop this formula?
It was originally developed sometimes in 1960s, last revision 1972.
So the allocation hasn't changed since the allocation formula hasn't changed since 1972. Correct?
The subsidy for, correct. The one issue is in the law, there's a, what do you call it, a CPI indicator supposed to use, but if you look at the current budget, there's no additional money put in for transportation. So even though it's in the law, they're not really funding it the way they should be according to the law. So
How often do they not fund it the way they should? Do
pretty,
they ever fund it the way?
I think it's last couple of years has
at least the last
happened.
few years has been that way.
Right.
So the question is, the same pot of money may be in there. We might not get 2.4 million because you got to see what all the other districts in the Commonwealth have. That some might get more money, we might get less money. Even though we're providing more service, we may get less. It all depends on the formula and the pot of money that they have.
Yeah, basically, that was one of the few progressive formulas left in the state where you get reimbursed when you get if your student population is growing, you're technically supposed to get more subsidy, but state has come up with they flatlined that number, so we don't know exactly. We may not get proportional money. Shortcomings of the state report is it was last modified in 1972. It's flatlined. When I read all the stuff that goes into the state report, there was nothing about bus aids, nothing about nurses, nothing about wheelchair buses, nothing about specialized equipment like wheelchairs, oxygen tank holders. So that all is unaccounted in the state reimbursement. And I think the 1972 special education was really, really tiny part of the budget at that time.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Vic, this question's more for you. That 2.4, when you show us the big pie chart of like source of revenue, this would be part of the state revenue that shows in that pie chart?
Correct.
And, okay, thank you.
In addition to that, we also, there is in a formula accounts for hazardous route students, so we do get reimbursed for students we transport if the route they have to walk on is PennDOT certified hazardous route. We just can't decide that it's hazardous. That's not gonna qualify for reimbursement, but if PennDOT has a identified road as hazardous, for example, Iton Road is hazardous, so basically every student in high school have to be bused. We also get $385 for each non-public student annually. It's just to give you a couple examples. For example, there's a run that serves two schools, one in the run that serves one school in Philadelphia. Now, actually, both schools are in Philadelphia. It has 23 students assigned to the run. Annual cost per student is approximately $1,666. So minus 380, that's $1,277 that are not unfunded. So multiplied by the bus, that's about $30,000. Another bus that serves two schools, Radnor and Ardmore schools. Annual cost is per student is $1,664. So it's $1,279 is unfunded, or around $25,000 per bus. Some of to be fair in this comparison, like state formula basically reimburses as many students you can put in a bus. So some of the district schools have a lot of students, non-public schools, so on those we work out pretty good. So there's a school that is in a district, it has 54 students, and annual cost per student is $442, because you run the same bus, but you run it for more students. We also look for grant opportunities. I'm not going to read all these numbers, but we try. All these grants are on the left side where it says CNG bus purchases. They are for difference between purchasing CNG buses versus diesel bus. So we get reimbursed, so then at the end our CNG bus costs same as a diesel bus, and price difference is around $30,000. We also, every year we submit for IRS excise tax rebate, which is 15 cents per gallon of gasoline equivalent. You can see that gives us about $100,000 a year. Unfortunately, this year this has still sitting in a Congress. I think it hasn't been approved, so we're waiting to see if we're going to get that money this year.
So I believe that law is approved annually by the government, that rebate. So every year we have to wait until the law gets renewed every year. So it's kind of delayed as to when we file, because we have to wait. It's not like January 1, hey, the law is in effect. Sometimes it might be February by the time they pass it. So we've been eyeing that and been getting the rebate.
Do we budget for that?
Yes, we do. It's
So-
take consideration when we do all our fuel costs and everything.
But back to the pie chart, is that a federal, would you put that in the federal, like the whole budget, federal source of income?
The rebate would go against the actual fuel cost for that.
Yeah, every year it gets later and later also in a year to wait, and they always have a new form, so we can't really get a start on it before they finally approve it. One of the last of my slides is our drivers. I want to thank board for continuously supporting our department, for providing all the resources for us to provide safe transportation and safe and effective transportation. And our drivers are extremely high-level drivers. So in 2018, they've placed first place in Montgomery Bucks school bus safety competition and third place individually in a Pennsylvania state competition. One of the Lower Merion drivers also went to international safety competition, which happened to be in Philadelphia last year. Questions?
I just want to throw out a thanks to the drivers, because, I mean, it's, you know, the thought of driving a bus through Belmont Hills in the snow just does not interest me at all. It scares me to death. And so what they have to deal with, especially when the weather is bad, it's pretty impressive.
I mentioned earlier about attempting, somebody asked me at a community meeting if we had figured out the bus routes for the new school, and to a certain degree we have, because we're trying to take a look at start times. But Aldous is constantly, you know, in the beginning of the school year, you know, you plan a route, and then all of a sudden you realize, well, that's taken 45 minutes because of traffic or because of just stuff happens on the route, and then you have to reroute, and you'll often add a route to try and get to the 30 minutes. We're all, you know, keyed in on whenever you see, when Rod Page, who was the superintendent of Houston Independent School District, became Secretary of Education, somebody asked him what was the major difference, and he said, when I go to work now and I see a school bus parked on the side of the road, I don't, you know, worry about it so much. So even when I come in, if I see a traffic situation, I'll call Jim or I'll call somebody to say, you're going to have a problem on such and such a road. If there's an accident, or if there's a road closure or a sudden anything or a tree down, they've got to change their routing on a dime and try and get the kids to school safely. But that is it's a big part of every single morning, and it's not getting better.
No.
There seems to be more people driving than ever.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, honestly, our drivers are amazing, and that's what makes them stronger. They are district employees, and many of them live nearby, so they know the district. They can reroute in a second. They can go around, because some of the stops you have to come back on a door side. You can't have a student crossing road, so they have to reroute, not just, hey, go around on another side of a road. It has to come back a door side, or sometimes we have to call a parent and say, can you come out to this location? Late buses, they have about 70 stops. Drivers don't make every stop. It depends. One day maybe 15 stops, one day maybe 40 stops. So when kids come on, they tell which stop they are, and driver basically routes his route in his head or her head and takes it. So that's invaluable. That's only can be done by the drivers who know district and experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellis. Jim, do you have something you want to close with?
Just
Before I'll open up the
Oh, yeah, thank you.
questions again.
Just to thank the board for the support, Mr. Copeland and Mr. Orlando as well for the funding that we have. During my first assignment at the district, I worked very heavily with the buildings and grounds and the building maintenance. The skilled trades are phenomenal. I've always thought very highly. Also, the grounds crew goes above and beyond. And then recently, in my current position, getting involved with the transportation, I think Aldous does have a really, really good team. I've been on bus runs in the morning and afternoon and had a migraine headache thereafter. During the snow, I actually followed one of the routes. It was Bus 55, John Sandloff. He was driving on roads that I was having a hard time getting my escape down the road, he's pulling a 72-passenger bus through this route. So it's a really, really good team, and we're very, very appreciative of the support that we get. Thank you.
Yeah, I drove a minibus for 3 summers. I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. And I'll just add, thanks to the entire maintenance and operations staff. People don't realize what it takes to get these buildings running every day as smoothly as they are. And I think you guys are responsive to requests and concerns when there's a problem, and so we're very grateful for all of that. Are there any further questions from the board?
Just thank you very much. I appreciate this very much, so thank you.
Public? No? Superintendent, do you have any questions?
No, just our next presentation, I think, is Student Services, April 3rd.
Great, thank you. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.